Finding oneself in front of a text that, upon being read, generates some perplexity is an everyday occurrence, and in our study case, the translated text is often source of doubts and uncertainties. In my thesis, I have therefore described and analyzed the first of the striking cases that have occurred to me and which led me to choose this course of study. The books I analyzed are two different collections of short stories by the American horror author H.P. Lovecraft, in which I found several points of divergence or differences in the translation choice. Why translate? To such a simple question, there is an obvious answer: to communicate. Humankind, but basically the rest of nature too, needs to exchange information, and the need to absorb as much as possible from our interlocutor, direct or indirect, is almost spontaneous. Any activity that has passage of information basically has a translation phase in it. Even in our bodies, there are an infinite number of active translations between the various organic phases of information. Suffice it to say that our genomes store an immense amount of information that is encoded in nitrogenous bases that are then read and translated as messages by the rest of the cell. Our computers are constantly translating the information they receive into binary language, the only language they understand, and translated it back into output that we can receive as video, audio, and other signals. Translation, therefore, as well as the study of language, however redundant it may seem to the most, is instead a source of enlightening results that can greatly improve our understanding of the world around us. Translating a text into another language can be summarized, without going to trouble the work of Saussure or Jacobson, who contributed so much to the word culture, as taking a message from one encoding to another, minimizing distortion in the transition. By message is meant any structure, physical or virtual, more or less complex, designed to move information. Encoding means the orderly and coherent arrangement of a certain number of rules or norms in order to make the message intelligible. Information is the content of novelty and unpredictability of a message between related systems. Also, each of the signals constituting a message that can be sent according to a certain code. A distortion in message is generated when the relationship between the encodings is not ambiguous, thus requiring an interpretation of the incoming encoding, which will generate an altered message. However, it must be remembered that a perfect translation is not always possible. There will always be a situation in which it will be up to the translator to reconcile the translation as far as possible. Translation is therefore very subjective, because it is totally based on the skills and knowledge acquired by the translator, which is precisely why, in time, digital ones will irrevocably replace physical ones. But until then, staying up to date and analyzing one's own work and others' work is not only advisable but essential in the professional branch. Comparative analysis, for example, can give us an idea of the differences between the various translators. Since the text is the same, every single discrepancy can be totally attributed to the differences between the translators. Historical period, skills, personalities, tendencies, and knowledge can transpire from these studies. And better understanding the others and their work helps to hone one's own skills. My thesis was therefore carried out by analyzing the various units into which the text was divided in order to isolate and catalog the differences. The end result was that while the older translation was closer to the original product in style, the newer one was much more consistent and readable. It must be pointed out, however, that the latter had been developed by two people and with CAT techniques, so it was to be expected that it would be the better in comparison. In favor of the older translation, Lovecraft's language was always much closer to poetry than to prose, and often the second version failed to convincingly convey certain nuance that the first, much more cultured in its stylistic choice, conveyed crystal clear. Working on this text was for me not only a source of new knowledge, but a very interesting journey into not one, but 3 different worlds. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of this activity, which, far from being mere mechanical mental work, requires a strong capacity of analysis, understanding, and abstraction.